I recently released my overall tier list where I ranked every brawler from worst to best in the competitive meta. I frequently get requests for me to do a competitive tier list for every single game mode, so last season I actually did Showdown, and this video is the 3v3 modes. Starting off, we got Gem Grab. Now, brawlers that are good at Gem Grab need to be able to maintain control of the map for a long time, and it also really helps if they have some sort of an ability for you to be able to take enemies by surprise. Janet is arguably the strongest brawler in Gem Grab right now because her attack does such a good job at controlling a large area, and it goes through enemy targets. She doesn't have a great ability for making a play on the enemy gem carrier, but whether she's holding the gems or she's stealing enemy gems, her super is one of the best abilities in the game for this mode. The next best brawler is arguably Griff, who is probably the best brawler in the game right now. His area control is just insane, and he also has really good survivability thanks to his business resilience star power. Then we have Otis, one of the other best brawlers in the game. His super is a great ability for protecting his gem carrier from assassins when they sneak up and try and unload all their shots on him, and he actually deals a fair amount of damage. We've got more to cover, but first I wanted to give a huge thank you to Stumble Guys for sponsoring this video. Stumble Guys is a free-to-play party game on mobile where you compete with 31 other players in several different events to see who will be the last man standing. Click the link in the description to download it now. Seriously guys, this game is so much fun. Every match starts out with 32 players total, and only half of them will advance to the next round. By round 3, only 8 players remain and 1 will be crowned the winner. There are tons of things on every map that will bump you all over the place, and they're a lot harder to avoid when you're constantly running into players. And you really need to be careful not to fall, or you'll respawn to the previous checkpoint, all while trying to race to the finish or complete other objectives like capture the flag with rocket launchers, or even a King of the Hill mode where you have to dodge lasers. You can also customize your character with all sorts of different cosmetics. You can change a lot of things like emotes, even their footstep animations, not to mention hundreds of different skins that you can unlock, like a skeleton, a clown, an alien, a mummy, a unicorn, even a banana. You know, for those of you that just love bananas. And with the big game going on right now, Stumble Guys is creating skins for some of your favorite teams like the Senegal Lion, or the Spanish Boar, or of course the USA Astronaut, and a lot more. We even have an evil referee skin. Plus we've got soccer emotes for the big game as well. So click the link below to jump into the game and see the craziness that's happening with the Turkey Takeover. And once again, a huge thank you to Stumble Guys for sponsoring this video. Now Gus is also really strong in the meta, not just overall, but Gem Grab is arguably his best game mode. Just like Otis, he offers really good protection to his teammates with his super and his healing ghosts, and he has enough range and DPS that he can carry the gems for his team, or to support another brawler that's carrying the gems. This is especially true now that it's a lot easier for you to actually hit his super, and the fact that it can go through walls. Now Gene isn't quite as versatile as Griff and Otis because he doesn't have very good DPS over time, but he does have decent burst damage, and his super is incredibly good for Gem Grab. Arguably the best super in Gem Grab, because if he lands one successful pull, that's all he needs for his entire team to win the whole match. Now next we have Bonnie, who usually moves slower than everybody else, but she adds some decent map control because her cannon deals a lot of damage and it has good range. The biggest reason Bonnie's an S tier brawler for Gem Grab is because her super can easily turn the game around if she's able to jump on an enemy gem carrier and steal all of the gems and then run away. Not only that, but sometimes she can use her super to escape with lots of gems as well. Also in the S tier we have Penny, who doesn't really have an ability that can quickly take out enemy gem carriers, but she provides a ton of area control. Not only does her cannon have a huge range, but it will sit on the map until the enemy gets rid of it, and sometimes that can be the entire match. Penny might have a slow start, but once she places that cannon down, it doesn't matter how far ahead the enemy team is. If they don't have an answer for it, they're gonna struggle. The last S tier brawler we've got for Gem Grab is Buster. Even with his emergency nerfs, he seems to be a really strong brawler. He's a little bit more map dependent than the other S tier brawlers for Gem Grab, but generally he does a great job at keeping enemies away from him and his teammates. And there you have the Gem Grab tier list. I'm not gonna cover all of the brawlers for every game mode because that would just be way too much, but feel free to grab that screenshot if you'd like. Just don't crop my face out if you share it anywhere, and if you wanted to tell people to use code Kairos, that'd be cool too. In all seriousness, no, just support somebody. Next, we got Brawl Ball, and this is another game mode that requires a lot of map control, but the meta is a lot different than Gem Grab because instead of having to just maintain control of the center, you eventually have to move the ball all the way up to the enemy's spawn. Because of that, while you still want brawlers that are really good with area control, this meta is a little bit more aggressive than Gem Grab. Starting off the top, we actually have Griff. Okay, he's probably the best brawler in the game right now, but his piggy bank gadget is particularly good in Brawl Ball. Not only can you use it to break walls, which can open up the map really well, but it actually makes it easier for you to score goals on the enemy, which is just insanely useful at any time. 3 times a match you get to use it. That's 1 for each side of the enemy wall and an additional wall that you want to take out. The next we have Otis, okay? He's particularly good in Brawl Ball, not only because he counters aggressive brawlers, but also if his target is holding the ball, they can't get rid of it until the starfish actually falls off of them. Being forced to walk the ball into the goal instead of shooting it makes it so much harder to score, especially in overtime. Next we have Stu, and he is a very aggressive brawler, but his breakthrough gadget comes really useful because of the same reason that Griff's does. He only needs to charge his super once, which only requires 1 projectile to land, and then he can take out an enemy wall, and that just makes it so much easier for you to get your shots in there. Plus, he can recharge his super very easily, which makes him great for super kicks, and also he's really hard to hit if he's dashing all over the place. The next is Max, okay, and she allows her entire team to put tons of pressure on the enemy with her super because it's so easy to score a goal if all of you guys are zipping around all over the place because it makes it really difficult for the enemy team to actually hit you. She can also make some really sneaky plays because of how fast she is and the help of her phase shifter gadget. Now next we have B, and B actually isn't very aggressive, but she's probably one of the best defenders in the game for Brawl Ball. Her range can match pretty much any other long-range brawler, but unlike other long-range brawlers, she can deal massive damage even at close range. She's also one of the most powerful brawlers in overtime because her super actually covers a wide area. And once an enemy is slowed, they're gonna die. Next we have Bonnie, who's also actually a pretty good defender, but as soon as she charges her super, she can make some really great offensive plays. Whether she shoots the ball forward and then launches herself to it, or she uses her super to take out an enemy defending the goal, or uses her super to go backward and block an enemy goal, it's a very useful ability for Brawl Ball. Next we have Gus, whose buffs to his super just made him much better in this game mode because he can shoot it through walls. This makes it so much easier for him or one of his teammates to move up the map, or even just walk the ball into the goal because they got additional health from that shield. Gale is way higher in this list than he is in Gem Grab because he's got all sorts of abilities that specifically are useful in Brawl Ball. He can use his super to push enemies out of the way for an easy goal. His super can also push close range brawlers away and knock the ball out of their hands, and he can use his Twister gadget to prevent enemies from grabbing the ball pretty much like the whole time the gadget's there, which is incredibly useful depending on the map. And there you have the Brawl Ball tier list. Next we got Heist, and it is a very unique tier list because brawlers that are really good in all other modes aren't necessarily good in Heist due to their low DPS. On the flip side, some tanky brawlers that usually can't do very well in the other modes do a lot better in Heist, specifically because their DPS is so high and they have a lot of HP that allows them to push to the end of the map. You'll notice that not a lot of the tanky brawlers are at the top of the tier list, but they're higher up on this list than any other game mode. Most other brawlers at the top of this list not only deal lots of damage, but are really good counters to tanks. You'll notice that brawlers like Sandy or Jean are at the bottom of the list simply because they deal very little damage over long periods of time, and ultimately a brawler has to be able to deal a decent amount of damage to the safe, or they're just unusable in Heist. At the very top of the tier list we have Max. She's kind of the best of everything in Heist. Her DPS is easily high enough to be able to do well on offense, and she outranges most close range brawlers that have to be close to the safe in order to deal damage. Not to mention the fact that her super makes it so much easier for her teammates to actually reach the enemy safe. Of course, Griff is also S tier for Heist. The only reason why he wouldn't be S tier is if he had low DPS, and he doesn't. He's got really great DPS. Now Otis has a little bit less DPS than Griff, but he still dishes out plenty of damage with his Ink Refills star power. Plus, his super completely shuts down all close range brawlers that rely on quick burst damage to destroy the safe, which makes him a pretty good counter to tanks. Now next is Belle, who's actually really good for Heist because her main attack will bounce off of the safe and onto nearby enemies, or the opposite. She also has a very far range, and her super is just another ability that makes it really hard for enemies to get past her. The last S tier brawler for Heist is Piper. She's really difficult to get past due to her range, and even though her attack doesn't bounce off of anything, her DPS is really high at max range, and she can shred the safe very quickly from a distance. She does have a slower reload speed, so she might not be as consistent as like Griff or Max, but her super counters close range brawlers because it instantly gets her away from them, and it breaks up the map, which makes it harder for them to get to the safe for the rest of the match. And there you have the Heist tier list. Next we got the Bounty tier list, which is almost the opposite of the Heist tier list because Bounty's way less about damage and a lot more about range and really staying alive. Close range brawlers really struggle in competitive Bounty matches because in order to kill anybody, they always have to put themselves within range of the enemy. So even if a close range brawler does get a kill, it's really hard to get back to their side of the map without getting killed themselves. Starting off at the top of the S S tier 4 bounty is Janet. She's just really hard to kill. She doesn't have the best range or burst damage for the game, but it is good enough to compete with other bounty brawlers, and if Janet picks up some stars, it is very tough to get them back because not only is it hard to deal damage to her, but once she's low on health, she can just use her backstage pass gadget or her super to get out of any situation. Next we have Jean, who is going from the second worst brawler in Heist to being the second best brawler in Bounty. So that should kind of tell you how different those two game modes are supposed to be played, right? He can't deal a lot of damage over time, but he has a really long range and his attacks are very easy to land. It does take him a little while for him to charge up his super, but once he does have one super up, as long as he gets within range of an enemy, all he has to do is just pull the right brawler to your side, and as long as Jean does have some cover, or he's able to burst down the enemy team by himself, then you guys are gonna have a really good advantage. Next we have Piper, who is basically made for Bounty because of her insanely far range and because of how much damage each single attack can do. Plus you have her homemade recipe gadget, which is so good for this game mode since it not only curves toward the nearest enemy, but it increases the range of her attack. She can also use her super to get out of any situation where she might die, which makes her pretty good at protecting the stars that she gets. Next we got Belle, who's very similar to Piper, so she really just, kind of ends up next to the Piper on this list. She doesn't have any abilities that allow her to escape enemies, but she does have a gadget that is really good at trapping enemies. Also, Belle's attack deals the same amount of damage whether an enemy is close up to her or far away, which is kind of an advantage over Piper in some way. Next, we've got Gus, who is at the top of this tier list as well. He's good at Bounty for a lot of the same reasons that Janet is good for Bounty. He's got decent range, he deals good damage, but his survivability is the best thing about him in this game mode, because I know a lot of people will play Bounty like the goal is to get kills, but the goal is more so to actually stay alive. Now, whether Gus himself is holding a lot of stars or his teammates are holding a lot of stars, his healing balloons and his super abilities are great for doing exactly that. Next, we got Tick, and this is the first time we're actually talking about Tick. He is an S tier 4 bounty because his attack range is just such a big radius, right? Since he's a thrower, he hardly even needs to put himself in any risky situations because he can just hide behind the walls while he's throwing out his attacks. Then you have his super, which is not only good for getting kills, but I've seen it used so many times just to block strong attacks that otherwise would have taken him or a teammate out. There's his last hurrah gadget, is another ability that can be used offensively, or he can use it to keep himself alive as well. And there you have the bounty tier list, very different than the previous ones we've talked about. Next we got Hot Zone, which is probably the most similar to Gem Grab because of all the areas on the map that you want to try and control. In fact, it's the exact same as Gem Grab if all you want is the center, if there's only one Hot Zone, right? One big difference between Gem Grab and Hot Zone though is that sometimes they have more than one areas that you want to control, and they're not always in the center of the map. That being said, very similar strategies are used in Hot Zone, so we're looking for brawlers with decent range and wide attacks that cover lots of area. Starting off, we've got Griff. This is the second game mode that Griff is the absolute best for. His main attack already covers a decent area, and it deals a ton of damage if he can get the most of his coins to hit. The biggest reason why he's ranked so high in this mode is because of his super though. His super can deal massive damage to everything inside of a zone, and it's insane. If you got his super on 3 enemies and they all get hit by it, they're gonna have to fall back or they're going to die. On top of that, his business resilience star power is just so great at keeping him alive and allowing him to heal pretty much the whole time. Next we have Poco, and Poco's main attack and his super have a very wide area and they have a lot of range as well. His Zacapo star power is great for keeping teammates in a zone, and then you have his Screeching Solo star power, which is great at getting enemies out of the zone. He even has a gadget that heals his whole team, which buys extra time inside of the zone. Poco is definitely fantastic to play in Hot Zone. Next we have Buster, who may not have the range that Poco does, but he's still an excellent brawler for keeping his team alive and controlling small areas. His super charges automatically if he and his teammates are nearby, which makes him particularly useful on single zone maps, but he also makes it pretty much impossible for the enemy to advance inside the zone once he actually has his super. He also has a lot of health as well as his utility belt gadget that can instantly heal his entire team a fair amount, like 1500 HP if he's got 2 teammates by him. That's actually insane. Next we got Penny, and she doesn't have any game modes where she's terrible at, but Hot Zone is definitely her best mode. The splash effect from her main attack is especially useful against enemies on this mode because they will frequently stack up on top of each other when they're trying to take control of a zone. Then you have her super, which obviously takes a while to charge up, but once it is up, if you position it well, it does such a good job at controlling the map. And even if you are a little bit behind by the time she puts it down, it does a great job at helping you regain control. Next, we got Janet, and we've talked about Janet. She's insanely good. Her super's maybe not the best for this game mode, but it's not bad either, but it's her attack. Her attack is so good for this game mode. It has a long range, it's very wide, it deals a fair amount of damage that can pierce through enemy targets. She's just really good. Another brawler that's just really good is Gus, right? Keeping himself alive, keeping teammates alive within the zone is absolutely fantastic, and his ghosts are very likely to actually spawn in the hot zone because that's where you're likely going to be hitting enemies, and that's exactly where you want them, which makes his heal, that is probably the best game mode for his healing ghost because of that. And finally, we got Gale, okay? Just like Penny, he doesn't have any bad game modes, but hot zone is his best. His super is so wide, and he's able to push everybody out of the zone in an instant. You can even slow with his star power, which is just fantastic. And then you have his Twister gadget, which is just hilarious to put in the hot zone because literally the people can't even get in the zone with it. It just completely shuts them down for 9 seconds, which is just insane. And there you have the hot zone tier list. Up next, we got the knockout tier list, which is actually pretty similar to Bounty because the objective is pretty much the same thing, just don't die. In fact, you have to be even more careful in knockout. But the biggest difference that affect each metas are that the maps in these modes are played very differently, and then you also have that smoke that pushes everyone toward the center at the end of each round. Burst damage is also very important for knockout, and you'll see that some of the assassins are higher on this tier list than in Bounty. If you can sneak up on an enemy brawler and take them out really fast, and they can't respawn and get revenge on you like they can in Bounty, right? Starting us off at the very top of the knockout tier list is Gene for several reasons. He's got good burst damage at close range, and he can chip away at enemies' health from a very far away distance, which prevents them from healing. Then you have his lamp blowout gadget, which is not only good for protecting himself from assassins, but he can use it to protect teammates from assassins if they're nearby. His super is obviously very useful for this game mode as long as you're patient enough to be able to charge up his super over time. Then as long as you get one pull on an enemy, it makes such a world of difference. And right behind Gene is Piper. Once again, her homemade recipe gadget is so excellent for taking out a single brawler just once, and that's all you need in knockout, right? Her super also keeps her safe from all sorts of abilities that can break up the map for the remainder of the whole match. And where Piper's gonna be good, the next brawler is obviously gonna be Belle, right? Her super puts a huge disadvantage on a target, and it doesn't always go away until they're defeated or until the round ends, obviously. Her reverse polarity is also a really good gadget for knockout when weakened and like brawlers try to move back to recover some health. So if you got really good aim, then you can actually get some really good unexpected kills with it. Next, we've got Tick, who is the ultimate brawler for just wearing enemies down and taking their health out little by little. If you're patient with Tick, the enemy is just gonna hate you. Plus, once the smoke starts rolling in, it gets even harder for you to avoid his mines, right? And then once he gets really close, he can drop his super on whoever's too close to him, and then he has his gadget to help kind of keep him alive. Next, we got Bonnie, who's a lot better in knockout than she is in Bounty. She doesn't get punished nearly as much in knockout for using her super to take out one brawler, and if she manages to survive in her melee form after taking out a brawler, she doesn't have to hit anyone else in order for her to get back into her cannon and repeat the process. Next, we've got Leon, who is the best assassin for knockout. He has a long range to help him charge up his super toward the start of the match, and once he charges it up, it's basically a free kill if you play it right. But before then, you also have his lollipop drop gadget, which gives the whole team a huge advantage, whether you need it in the early game or late game when things are getting a little bit tighter. And for his 5th tier list, Gus barely makes his way into the S tier as well. As I've mentioned, Gus is just really good at keeping his team alive, and that's really the only objective in this game mode. His spirit, animal star power, and his kooky popper gadget are actually really good abilities for dealing lots of burst damage, but only to a single brawler, so this is like one of the best game modes to use them. And there you have the knockout tier list. I really want to know what you guys think about this video. Is this useful on top of the regular tier list? If so, please like this video. And if you guys like it enough, maybe I'll consider doing this maybe every 6 months or so when things actually change a lot in each game mode. Either way, make sure you subscribe for some awesome future content. And if you missed my overall tier list or my showdown tier list, they're right here. For now, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.